So here we are with Lisa Parrott. Hi, Lisa Parrott.
Hi, Sean Whalen.
How are you?
Good.
That's good. Okay, well, I've got a bunch of questions.
All right.
But with you, I want to just take things a bit left and talk about things that I haven't talked to a lot of other people about.
Okay.
And I just had a look at your website, and I noticed that you spent quite some time in Australia before you came here, and played quite a bit of music with Australian people. And your website mentions your discography,
Right.
including recordings with
Oh, yeah.
Mood and Jackie Azowski and
Yeah.
the Melody Rhythm Ensemble,
Yep.
etc. And oh, someone's at the door. I'll keep talking.
Okay.
Hi, Echo. Come on in. We're doing an interview. My wife has returned.
Hey.
I have a sense that musicians are moving to New York much earlier now, and they have a much less of a sense of connection to Australia culturally.
Musically, culturally.
Yeah.
I can't really
Are you aware of
speak
that?
for other people because, because I'm not other people. But you have called me for this interview on a very auspicious day.
Right.
Today is the 20th anniversary of when I first got to New York.
Oh my goodness me.
20 years today, 19th of April, 93, was when I first arrived here. I was pretty. I looked just last week. I knew it was coming up, and looked at, found the exact date. I was like pretty psyched. So I was 25 when I first landed.
Right.
But I had a very full career in Sydney during the con and outside of the con. So I did a lot in only the 6 years that I was based in Sydney.
What year was that?
88, I moved to Sydney, went to the con. And yeah, so that was 5 years. I came for 9 months. That's when I did my study with Steve Coleman. And then went back for a year and a half.
What years did you come here and study with Steve Coleman?
That was 93.
Okay, so I was at the con, right? Yeah.
And then came back December 93. Something like that. And that would take up the whole interview if we went into that whole story.
Yeah.
Of why I had to pack up and leave in a hurry, but that's another story. So spent the next year and a half doing nude, basically, in Australia, based in Sydney, and then came back mid-95.
So why is it that you perform Waltzing Matilda when you do a gig? And
that comes...
Why are you more culturally connected to Australia than other people?
That's interesting. I think that comes from the longer you live here, the more Australian I feel. I'm an Aussie New Yorker. I have both passports now. I got my American passport. There's no way I would have if Australia didn't have dual citizenship. There's no way I would have actually done that. I also think because I had such formative, the music that I was making in Sydney, and the musical personal musical relationships I formed in the Sydney scene in the early 90s formed me as a musician and as a person. So when I came to New York, I felt like early on that I already had a sense of who I wanted to be as a musician. And I remember having the thought of like, I wonder if that even is valid in New York. Like what I did only made sense in Australia. I remember having that specific thought about how I approached and played jazz, will it actually translate or something? You know, my biggest influences have to be Bernie McGann and Ornette Coleman. You know, I probably don't sound as Bernie-like as I used to, but I
do to me.
Oh, you do? See, I don't know. It's been so... I haven't heard Bernie in...
Live for a long time.
Live since the 90s. Since... I don't think I've been able to catch him when I've gone home. So, I've only on recording, which is a different kettle of fish, you know. In 1988, when I first moved to Sydney, I saw every one of Bernie McGann's gigs for a whole year. Every gig that he played in Sydney, I was at.
Mostly the Strawberry Hills Hotel.
Strawberry Hills, around midnight.
Oh, yeah. He played there every week, didn't he? Is that right?
Yeah.
I wasn't around for that.
Yeah, so that was 88. So, and of course I would see him a lot, but because I was just going to the con and didn't have any gigs, no work or anything, so I was always at Bernie's gigs. I don't know why I immediately connected and immediately was just to me that was, well, first of all I went down to Sydney as a tenor and soprano player.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Right before I started the con, like right before the semester, the year started, my tenor got squashed by a foldback speaker that, you know, I picked up my soprano for a tune and playing with a rock band at the hotel in Glebe opposite the Trots there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That Harold Park Hotel, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that was 88, end of 87. So that tenor got squashed. And that was a Mark 6 that I'd just gotten 2 months prior and hadn't changed over the insurance. So for the first year I was in Sydney, I only played soprano. I was studying with Don Burrows. This is a really good form. Don Burrows was way more of an influence, you know, than I ever thought he would be. He taught me standards by trading fours. He taught me melodies. We never looked at sheet music or anything. Like, he taught me tunes simply by playing the melody, I play it back, and then trading fours, learning the changes that way. Which is just, you can't beat that, you know. He also told me another thing, it was probably the first lesson. He said, what's more important, sound or time? And I considered that I had a beautiful sound and soprano, and I said, sound. He said, no, time. So at his suggestion, and that was my weakest, at that time, my weakest part of my playing. My time feel. I did everything with a metronome. I still do this. I still do all of my practice, if I'm not playing in an odd time zig jazz, everything with a metronome on 2 and 4. Right. Everything, including long notes. Right. Just to get it in there, you know. That was the best advice. It's incredible how many musicians do not do that. To me, you know, that don't practice. Or if they practice with a metronome, they're not thinking that it's the hi-hat, you know. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, that he got me playing Barry.
Don did?
Yep. So the first time I played Barry was in the Con Big Band. He thought, I think you'd be a good Barry player. Don't know why he thought that, you know, because it's like such a big part of my career here, you know. And it wasn't until maybe it was that year, halfway through that year, I had an alto. I started dabbling on alto, but it was through meeting Cameron Undy, that I was introduced to Ornette Coleman. And that was actually it. Ornette was, even though I'd already been, I was seriously into jazz and, you know, studied, transcribed. I'd already been doing gigs for 2 years in Newcastle before I moved to Sydney. But it wasn't until, so I'd already been doing a lot of stuff. But it wasn't until I heard Ornette's music that everything from then on, it changed everything. From then on, everything was filtered through the study of harmonics.
I just want to say, if you lean on the table...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Then
it
the
bumps
camera shakes, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'll lean on that.
It's cool, yeah, if you can do that.
that.
So, but had you heard Bernie before you heard him live?
Oh,
Heard
no.
him on recording?
Oh, I first heard Bernie... would have been in Newcastle. I remember him playing in Newcastle, like at the Workers' Club or something, when they still had jazz. So that would have been... So I met... The group that was in Newcastle was Andrew Dickerson. I was the oldest. I was 17 when we met. I was in year 12. Andrew was in year 11. Nikki on bass, Adrian Mears, trombone. They were in year 10. And John Foreman was 12.
Oh, right.
And John and Andrew went to Katara High together. So they went to the same two high schools. And me, Nikki and Adrian, I went to Toronto High. So we met at Pan Pacific Jazz Camps. That's where we got together. Me and Andrew in the same ensemble. And John, actually. So that's how I met Andrew, and that's how we formed the band Blues by Five.
Right. And how old were you then? At the
I
Pan
was
Pacific
17.
Jazz camp. You were 17?
Yeah.
And was Adam Ponting at that jazz camp too?
He was, but I didn't meet him until the following jazz camp. Yeah, I didn't meet him. So that was like right before, as an aside, it was the May school holidays, went to the jazz camp. Next week, I was diagnosed with diabetes. So as long as I've been playing jazz...
You've had diabetes
I've had diabetes,
too.
yes. I did ironically call a series of gigs I did with Adam in Sydney, like in 95, early 95, Lisa Parrott, 10 years of jazz and diabetes. Anyway.
I remember you organised a jam session at the Harbourside Brasserie. Wasn't that your idea, or?
Oh, that came, yes, me and Cameron, because all my Sydney thing was we co-led and co-did a lot of things. That came from my experience living in New York at the time.
Playing at St. Mark's Bar or something.
Yeah, I was living in the East Village, living at 12th and A. There was so much music going on. It's where all the artists, it was really cheap to live there. My rent was $430 a month.
Where were you living there?
12th and A.
Oh, wow, it's a good spot.
12th between A and B.
Yeah,
and that was actually expensive at that time. Like the whole apartment was $800 for 2-bedroom. And there was so much music going on in the East Village. I hardly ever went to if I went to the West Village, it was to go to the Vanguard or something. There was nothing else. It was where everybody lived and hung out at that time, and it was an amazing scene. There were 3 bands a night at St. Mark's Bar.
All right.
So.
And there was.
And the jams.
Izzy Bar, right? And was Detour sort of an acceptable
It was.
place
That was
to
a
play
bit
back
later.
then?
That was a bit later. That was a bit later.
Where else was there music in the East Village? You remember?
I think I spent nearly every night at
the St. Mark's Bar.
Yeah, seriously.
Who did you see play there?
If I wasn't playing little gigs elsewhere. Sunday night was a big thing, and this also, Carl Dewhurst lived for 6 months during that time that I was living there. So we hung out a lot. And Stu Hunter. That was before Nikki had moved. She moved in 94. Sunday nights was huge there, and that Ralph Lalama led the jam session there.
Right.
And Ralph's trio, it reminded me of Bernie's sort of trio, just real hard swinging standards, just really playing jazz, really playing. It was Clifford Barbaro, different bass players. I'm blanking on the bass players.
Maybe Dennis Irwin or
Dennis sometimes. Yep, Dennis. I remember the first time I heard Dennis. I do remember that. I was at the back of the room, and
there was a lot of sound.
And I was like, "Shit, the bass is really loud."
Yeah.
And,
where's the amplifier?
And I said it to Clifford Barbaro, the drummer. He's like, he's playing acoustic.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah, I hired him for a recording session, and we were setting up, and I said to the engineer, "There's a lot of bass in the headphones." And he said, I haven't turned the mic on."
yeah,
It's just
no,
like, boom, man.
yeah,
Strings like,
yeah.
strings that far off the bass.
Yeah.
And physical effort.
And there was another guy, but unfortunately I'm blanking on his name. He passed away from cancer during that year,
Okay.
or maybe like a couple of years later. Actually, from then, but he played a lot with them too.
Do you want some water? I'm going to fill up my water. You
good. I'm
Yeah,
good. So me and Carl would go and hang, and it was interesting. And this is when I was thinking, does the way I play, is it okay to play the way I play in New York?
Yeah.
You know, sitting in there and getting encouragement. And I noticed, and this didn't happen at Australian sessions, or even on gigs or whatever. I didn't get a lot of this. If someone liked your playing, but they felt like they could suggest something, these older cats would say something. They would make suggestions. You know, at the first time it happened to me, I was like, "What's that about?"
Yeah.
And then realize, oh, this is out of, they
Respect.
see some, yeah, and you know that. So I felt like I was always learning something, and
Yeah.
that's also a reason. That's the reason. One of the reasons I left. I felt like I'd stopped learning.
In Australia.
Oh yeah, yeah. I felt like that can really sum it up to that. I felt like I'd stopped learning, and that's not a diss on the scene. I'm just saying that. I was just stuck. I also didn't like how pigeonholed I was there. And I liked that I could come to somewhere like New York. I could be anonymous, where I could play standards if I wanted. I could play even. I've played such a different range of music here, and I feel like there's less. I think it happens to still a certain extent, but there's way less pigeonholing here. You know, so I've been able to play with Brazilians. I've been able to play trad jazz with no one caring that I like Ornette Coleman. You know. I've been able to play a lot because I see a lot of, and it's not just me. There's a lot of people doing that sort of thing. You see them in different circumstances, because I love playing all sorts of different, types of music. I remember if I'd want to use a different group that would say playing standards or doing something more straight ahead in Australia, especially the people at SEMA would be, no, we want the other group that you've had together. And, I just felt like I couldn't, it was hard for me to do other things,
I was talking to Adrian Cunningham about the fact that in Australia the trad guys don't talk to the bebop guys.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a line.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist in New York so much.
There is a bit of a line, like, I think, Nikki would be a person to ask about that.
Yeah, right.
When I say I've done Dixieland gigs and stuff like that, they're also, sometimes the lines are blurred. You get cats who play Dixieland, but they also are mixing in other stuff with it and stuff like that here. You don't have as much
Because
crossover
someone like
there.
Art Cohen, I can't think of someone like that in Australia. It's sort of so broad.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say she was forced in, because she plays clarinet, she was more forced into playing
The old stuff.
Yeah,
I
into
don't know.
Dixieland.
I don't really know enough about it.
Right, I mean, that was something she had to
She must
work
know
on.
from playing. She was in that.
She was in Diva. We were good friends. When she first moved down from Boston, she went to Berkeley. She joined Diva pretty much straight away. That was in '99, and I can't remember how long she was in the band. Quite a few years. We spent quite a few years, and we had a lot of work back then, like traveling together, and we hung out. We have what we called the UN of Diva, all the foreigners of Diva. Seriously, the UN. And we have these
Who
silly
else is in
things.
the UN?
You and you and you and you. We go around a circle saying you and you and you. Anyway, at the time it was Carolina Strassmeyer, Austrian saxophone player. Me and Nat and Noriko from Japan.
Yeah.
That was the they were the core
You were the
core of
UN.
the members of the Diva UN. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. We would all usually find ourselves like, oh, it's the UN hanging out again. You know, we gravitate towards each other.
Is your life still a bit like that?
No.
I mean, you're sort of married to an American person now, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
no,
your
but there's
life's
so many
different now.
foreigners here. I mean, you can't get away from them.
Can't avoid
I mean, that, you know, Steve Coleman said to me, you know, the best thing about New York is that there are little towns all over the world, and the best couple of musicians will move to New York.
Mm.
You know, obviously he was very much overgeneralizing, but he said that's what's so great about this place is that like-minded people come to be here. And another thing about a big difference between being a musician in Sydney and being a musician here, for me, was I had quite a few of my peers telling me to chill, that I'm too intense.
In Australia?
Yeah. And I get to New York and I'm like, oh,
I'm laid back.
I'm laid back compared to these cats. Like, well, just the level of intensity suited my personality. I battled depression living in Australia.
Really?
Yeah. In hindsight, and I feel like the way New York is suits my personality more. And it's interesting, I'm not the only person that has said that. Also about the intensity thing, I had the exact conversation with this last time I hung out with Andrew Dickerson back in Sydney. He was talking about all of his students think he's crazy because he's so intense and passionate about the music, and so he's still trying to do stuff over there, but he says he gets told that all the time.
To cool it.
That he's too intense, you know. I mean, and we completely bonded and related on that fact that it's like hard being that way in Australia, in a place like Australia. You're seen as a bit of a freak, you know. I'm don't feel as much of a freak here. Even though it's interesting that you're saying you consider me as still very Australian, or no? How did you put it in the beginning? Like
culturally attached to Australia,
right?
Just
Well,
your
you
sense
mentioned
of your sense of yourself, because I mean, if you look at other musicians' websites that I've interviewed, some of them, like, it's like their biography starts the day they got off the aeroplane.
I've noticed that too.
Their history.
I've noticed that too, but
and even
like I said, that's where I've come from. I don't see the two as separate. That's just been part of my musical life, and especially since, although I had a long break, didn't play a gig in Australia for 12 years until last time I was home, which was 2 years ago now.
Wow.
I know, and well, part of me was waiting. I wanted to take back a group I was playing with here. I wanted to do that, but also, you know, I was pretty busy here. When I go home, I want to hang out with family and friends. Like the idea of rehearsing, you know, new music with people, music that was new to people. You know, it just was not something I really wanted to do. But, and also, to be honest, the money wasn't worth it either. It was not worth the time and effort, to be honest.
Sure.
So, but a couple of years ago, I was just like, I'd really like to play with Cameron and Carl again. We managed to make it work, and it was a bit ridiculous, Sean. You would have loved it.
It was good fun.
Me, Cameron, Carl, and Simon.
Barker.
We did 2 gigs, one in 505, one in Newcastle, and then Cameron flew down with me, and we played with a young guy that I'm blanking on his name because I'd only met him. He was 20 years younger than us. I think his first name's James.
He came. What
The
did
drummer.
he play? From Newcastle.
No, down in Melbourne. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway,
I've been gone a long time.
but it was really interesting. Like, and the grin, especially on, you know, when Carl gets his grin on, it's pretty funny. Just that we were doing, it's as if it was yesterday we were still playing together
Mm.
because we were just starting tunes without counting them off, just playing melodies together. And you know, it was interesting to hear Kanjia's perspective because she'd never heard us play that stuff, and she said, I've never heard you play like that. I play different with them than I do, you know, with other people, you know.
Of course.
And she said it was very interesting just to see the telepathy that's still there. It was so interesting to feel like, wow, this is still a really, not only was it fun to play, it had amazing feelings, it was just like really, it was still just as focused as ever. It was really interesting.
Mm.
It's like, still, obviously it's just still a big part of us all.
Mm.
You know, that was pretty wild.
Those guys have really developed a great deal in the last 20 years. All those three guys have really sort of...
Yeah. But it's really funny.
All
We've
sorts of different aspects
like
to their
in an instant there
personality.
was the common ground there that you know, I feel like this with I've developed these sort of relationships also with, you know, not of course my sister, but other bass players. I don't know what it is about bass players, you know, like Matt Pavolka, I feel a real kinship with. There's a bunch of guys, Chris Lightcap, that, you know, there's a thing. Although I'm talking about that, but I'm actually playing the least amount of
because you're really into creating things on the spot with the harmonic thing, right? It's sort of like the bass is a big the sense of it being a contrapuntal music.
Yeah, right. That it's a conversation. It's not
As opposed to here are the chord changes and the bass player's going to play the root note.
Right.
And then he's probably he or she's going to play the fifth on the third beat of the bar, or
Right.
you know,
Right.
it's different.
But I feel like I still apply those sort of principles when I'm playing with chord
Changes.
instruments or changes.
You're really listening
No.
to the bass.
Oh, always. That's that's always have.
Is that something you figured out with Cameron, or something that you figured out yourself, or is that something Don Burris told you to do?
Don did make me practice bass lines.
Right.
You know,
On the Barry or on the alto? Or
no, just
tenor
on
or?
any instrument, doesn't matter.
Right.
No, to learn a tune.
Right.
If you can make make a
Bass line.
really good bass line, I feel like I still suck at bass lines. But maybe that put the focus there. Nah, I think it's just something I've always done. Way before Dawn, I was already playing. I don't know.
Because your sister plays the bass.
But I feel like I really... Yes, there's that, which I told her to play. That's another story. But I really feel like there's like... I have really made an effort to split my listening. I don't really completely focus on the bass. I'm trying to like listen to when I'm improvising. I'm trying to listen to the individual parts, also that sound that it makes as a whole, and where I fit into that. I try to be. It's almost like it's like a lot of different thought, a lot of different stuff going on at the same time that creates a whole. So if I was only listening to the bass, I would be definitely missing what the drummer's doing. It's impossible for me to divorce any of it. But I do feel like people don't listen to the bass enough, you know, in general.
Well, that's
but,
me, you know. Hello, I'm guilty of that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm guilty of not listening.
I wanted to go back to something that you asked I didn't touch on, which was how come you play Waltzing Matilda at your gigs?
Yeah.
God, it must have been about 10 years ago, probably at least.
You're shaking the table again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Chris McNulty I played a gig with Chris McNulty at BAM Cafe. And it was for some Australia thing. Maybe there was a movie. There was like a whole Australia thing. There was dance going on, and she got booked to do the gig. So I thought, hey, why not? you know, I wouldn't have done that if I was living in Australia. There's no way I would have ever written an arrangement of Waltzing Matilda.
Right.
It comes from living here. You kidding me?
Right.
And I don't think it's. And you know, I was only inspired to do it after I got inspired by, first of all, living here. People are always asking you about stuff about Australia. I've realised I didn't know enough anyway about Aboriginal culture, all sorts of stuff. So when I every time I go back, I buy more and more books, and I you know, educate myself. It was interesting. I felt like I had to. I felt like I didn't know enough about my own country when I was living there. You know, and it came from people asking me questions. You know, especially about the Aboriginal experience. You know, that I started doing my own. You know, just research into not just history, just stuff, just a lot of different stuff, including finding out that like the Matilda is actually the hangman's rope.
Yeah.
And that suddenly I the whole tune took on a completely different meaning. It's in 4/4. It's super happy, but it's actually not. It's completely dark. It's about these guys about to get hung because they were hungry and stole some sheep. Yeah. You know, it's that to me is incredibly Australian, where you're talking about something heavy, but you have to still make light of it. The music part is light, and the subject matter is extremely dark. So when I did arrangement of it, I put it in 3/4 and in a minor key to just to more emphasize like the other side of what that tune's about, you know. But and you know at one stage I still haven't recorded it. I had an idea of recording like a folk song project, like, and it'd be all sorts of different types of folk songs, you know, not just colonial ones, but you know, whatever. But you know, that's not happened. But that came out. That was also part of that. I started like researching some really cool melodies, like Brisbane Ladies. I still want to do an arrangement of that. And I'm blanking on the melody to that. Really cool. You know, like, you know, also I did record that one, the Bound for South Australia. That I learnt in 3rd grade, you know, and that came from me and Carl busking on the street. Astor Place. He was playing like, and he had all these like he'd made up all these different ways of practicing scales for his students. It was like a little exercise. You know, just like, anyway. And just one time I just started going straight 8 over top, you know, just playing that, you know, just for the hell of it, you know. So that's how that arrangement came out. Yeah, that's how I made an arrangement of it later, because I've always just loved that melody. Again, it all comes down to melody, you know. So when I'm playing, to go back to I always feel like I'm playing harmonics, whether I'm playing on a stand or not, because I really believe in the idea of logic. Like, if you make a statement, a musical statement, you really don't have any choices. People ask me, how do you play free? I was like, I don't really consider it. It's not really free. You're always making choices, therefore it's not free. Because if you say this, for it to follow its true course, you have to follow its own logic that you've set up. You know, because otherwise it does sound like a load of crap, you know. And to me, music still has to be, it's intuitive logic that's like part of us, you know, and that's what, you know, I'm very respectful of, and you know, always try to honor that part of it. Like, you know, everything has to have its thing. So I try not, you know,
you don't just play stuff just for the sake of.
Well, exactly. I feel like the way I play, it took me a long it's a longer process, say, to play changes, because I didn't learn a bunch of patterns to be able to get through changes, or I didn't learn a bunch of... I remember at the con when they taught us the blues diminished, we got taught these scales and these things you can do. I remember thinking for like a month, like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Now you just messed me up.
You ruined everything.
Yeah, you ruined everything. And then I realized, oh, you still have to make choices. It doesn't negate any of the other stuff, you know. So
it's just a viewpoint that you can look at that other stuff through. If
exactly. But I remember having that thing as a student, going, now what, you know? But hanging out with Rick Ballin in the early 90s, who got me reading Wittgenstein and a lot of philosophy. I'd always been into reading a lot of philosophy and stuff like that, and actually sort of trying to... Actually even started as a little notebook I still have at home. I never finished these things. Like taking each statement and how it applied to music, you know. It's you know, it's just, for me, it's a very attractive way to think, you know.
I'm going to cut you off.
Yes.
Can you tell me? You said you'd stopped learning in Australia, and you came here, and you had... I'm just tying some of this stuff together. You had a bit of this knowledge of... You knew what the diminished scale was, and you had a sense of Ornette's playing, and you'd studied a bit with Steve Coleman. Yeah. So, what have you learnt about specifically how to apply those things if you're playing Caravan, or what, you know? What have you learned here?
Well,
can you put it into words?
The learning I was talking about is that
you just
over here,
you feel like you're still improving.
Yes, I feel like I had
in
stagnated.
What sense? Can you?
The big thing.
What's getting better? Your sound, your time, your
all
everything?
Of that. The big thing is that Steve said to me, "You should study with some of the. You should hang out and study with the older cats. That's the real reason you come to New York." So in '97, applied for another grant. So I studied with Lee Konitz. Had a handful of lessons with Lee. That was at Steve's suggestion. I actually didn't know much about Lee's music before I started studying with him, other than listening to it and going, "Wow, there's a similarity there. I can totally relate to." And I think I'm talking about the logic lines and logic side. I could totally relate to in Lee's playing. And those lessons were completely different. Anyway, to answer your actual question, I get to play with a lot of older guys here and learn off the older guys. And I do feel that was harder
in Australia.
Yeah.
To play with Bernie and Poche.
Well, I played with those guys, but and I did learn from playing with those guys, but.
You studied with Don. I mean, it's pretty.
Yeah.
Sort of a legend of Australian jazz, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Playing with like a whole range of drummers and a whole range of musicians, them telling me stories, like getting to hang out with. Okay, Tommy Newsom was that, you know, he wrote all the stuff for Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
The Tonight Show band.
Yeah.
So when I started copying. Doing professional music copying. Yeah. I started doing that with Diva. That was like 11 years ago now. That's a completely other world. There's no way I could learn any of that stuff in Australia.
Right.
I started learning about the right way to copy.
Yeah.
He told me a couple of stories. The first one, I remember the first chart. I said I'm not sure what the etiquette is, like. You know, I see some mistakes, but I know you meant a B flat because it's unison or something. He's like, do I ask you about those or just, you know, or just correct it? Well, what's the etiquette here? Do I ask you about every little thing? And he said, when Duke was trying out a new copyist,
change. He would make a few mistakes to see if the guy was going to fix it.
He would put I can't remember if it was one or two now. I think it was just one. I think it was two. Two mistakes in the chart that he knew about, that Duke knew about, deliberately, and would expect the copyist to correct it and not ask him.
Right.
That's how he would get the gig.
Right.
And Tommy's point was like, you're supposed to make me look good.
Yeah.
I don't want to know when I made stupid mistakes.
I'm playing you.
Yeah, so it was very interesting because, like, I tell you what, there's like in this day and age of everybody using Sibelius and Finale, the art of engraving. Oh my God, it's so gone out the window. People don't know what good music's supposed to look like to be able to be played properly. And it's funny coming from all the bands I led in Australia. I hardly ever wrote anything down. It was all about rehearsing.
Yeah.
But I grew up doing all the AMEB theory musicianships exams and have a love for beautifully notated music. There's it's not notation. I think it's separate from music. There's that opened up a whole other world. I have now many of New York's best composers, like their charts on my computer and like how they get their sounds. Man, that's a complete lesson there. So this stuff I had no idea that I would be learning about, and so he would tell me all sorts of different stories. Tommy would, as well as, hanging out with Les Paul. He would tell. I remember him just hearing these sort of stories, like him talking about when I think he was 15 when he didn't run away from home, when he left home to start going on the road touring, playing music. They were in Chicago and they'd heard about this new hotshot trumpet player, so they were like, let's go and, we have to go and check this guy out. It was Louis Armstrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, you meet the guys who were telling stories about who we consider legends now of the music, and, these are just people. That's exact. And Steve Coleman told me a great story once to illustrate this same point. He, because I found it interesting. The first lesson we had went for 12 hours. Went and stayed at his place he's got a house out in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Steve does.
Yeah, he'd only just gotten it like 6 months before or something.
Yeah. So it's an hour north of New York or something, or an hour and a half?
It's at least an hour and a half. I think it's 100 miles out. Okay. Maybe it's 2. Yeah. Maybe slightly under, but it's out towards, not far from Delaware Water Gap.
Yeah.
So his place, there was a music room full of all these books. There was the guest room that I stayed in was full of books on non-Western art and philosophy. It was fantastic. And went out the night before we hung out. He'd played just a solo New York Society for Ethical Culture. It's when you first get to New York, this, jazz is still in it. I go to this thing, and at the time I didn't know these people. Some of the best African American poets were speaking at this thing. Maya Angelou was speaking at this. I didn't know who these people were before then. I had no clue. I'm like, and there's references to jazz all through this poetry and these stories that people are telling. And then Steve was playing just played Round Midnight solo in the middle of this thing. In this big, New York Society for Ethical Culture, and it's just like, what sort of planet is this? In terms of they're talking about the music I love, and these aren't musicians.
Yeah.
So it's just in it all. So we went out.
Has that changed though?
I don't think so, really.
Still, New York still got that same.
You just got to. I still encounter it all the time. People telling me stories. I do encounter it all the time, you know.
Sorry to cut you.
Oh no, it's all right. On the way in the car, I gave him a cassette tape of me and Cameron playing duo, and because we was like the lessons had been lined up a year before because of all the grant process, and he was sort of like, it's not like he was actually teaching. He didn't have any students. He didn't teach.
Yeah.
You know. So he listened to it and then was like, had a million questions for me. How did you guys come up with this stuff?
Yeah.
You know. I'm like, I don't know. It's just what we've been doing. This is just our thing that we do. And so, the lesson the next day, like started at 12, and it wasn't actually, it wasn't really a lesson. He talked about, the systems, Bartok and symmetry. He talked about all the technical stuff, but we transcribed Bird together. And it was very interesting because, like, certain types of lines, the more mathematically inclined lines, he was very quick on, whereas the more melodic things, I was getting, faster. And it was like, wow, together we'd be the perfect bird, and stuff like this. And then we were listening to Bela Bartok play. He had recordings of Bela Bartok playing his own stuff. Have you ever heard that?
No.
He played it. I was like, is this some obscure monk I've ever... I thought it sounded like monk. I'm dead serious. Bela Bartok.
Just playing the piano?
Yeah, just solo piano.
I've heard Debussy playing Debussy. That's really great.
Right, yeah. And I thought it was monk, seriously. So, anyway, interesting stuff. And then he actually, started practicing after that, and I was like just reading books and stuff like that. And he told me a story, like, because he was inspired by the day. But he wasn't practicing to show off because I was in the next room. It was he was making mistakes, correcting himself. It was just, and so they weren't really lessons. They were like, we were just doing stuff together, and it was really interesting. It was the first time I'd experienced, like, not a very strict teacher-student thing at all. It was really interesting stuff. Sort of of course, I learned a lot, but
Japanese version of.
Oh, really?
Well, you're sort of not allowed to ask questions.
Right.
You just sort of watch the master do it.
Right, but it wasn't really that. It was very much, we were doing stuff together,
Yeah.
And he told me a story, like when he first got to New York, went down to the Vanguard, Max Roach and Abby Lincoln were playing, and he went up to Max and just said, I just want to thank you for all the music you made with Bird, and Max said, come and sit in tomorrow night. I can't remember how he phrased it, how Steve phrased his thanking him for the music, but he's like, really? You haven't heard me play or anything? Anyway, oh no, it wasn't that. That wasn't it first. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. He's like, come to my place for Sunday dinner, lunchtime. Come for lunch next Sunday. He's like thinking, whoa, that's a bit weird. So he goes up there. It's a massive family dinner up in Harlem, up at Max's place, and all the extended family there, and it's just a regular old thing. And then afterwards, Max, for like 2 hours, just tells stories about him and Bird hanging out. Not music stories, about him hanging out. And his point to Steve was, we're just people playing music. Like, that's what it was about. That we're not gods, that we shouldn't be put up on a pedestal. We're just people playing music, and you can do this too. Right,
That's a great
and that
way to
was,
teach.
and that's why he told me that story, because that's how he wanted to approach it too, with me. Yeah. He'd be extremely respectful. Anyway.
Yeah, it's cool. The other question, and we've been talking a long time, but
Yeah.
if you don't mind,
No.
talk a bit more.
No, it's all right.
The other interesting thing about you, apart from being culturally connected to Australia, is just that you were one of the first Australians here.
Yeah, I only knew of
there's-
Tim Otto.
Mhm.
Well, Murray Wall has been here since, I think, the 70s,
Yeah.
bass player. Tim Otto, but I didn't actually even know Tim in Sydney.
Mhm.
So when I came here, I literally did not know anybody at all.
You didn't know Chris McNulty, did you?
She'd already been over here. No, I
What
literally...
about Barney McCall? Did you meet him?
He
here
came
or-
later.
Came later.
Yeah.
And what about? Do you remember other Australians being here that have now gone back? Like I don't know, like Dale Barlow or.
He wasn't living here. Dale, when he was fully living here, was pre-98. So when I studied with Mike, I actually had a handful of lessons with Dale when he first got back from New York, 87, that year when I was still a tenor player.
87.
Yeah.
Crikey.
Yeah. 87, yeah, a handful of lessons in the Christmas holidays before, when I was still playing tenor, before I moved down to Sydney. Us guys up in Newcastle, we were coming down a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In the 2 years in between, I went to Newcastle Con, was going to be, I was doing Be My Said.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I did that for a year and a bit, and then left and was only doing gigs and teaching in Newcastle before I moved down fully. So me, Nikki, Adrian, and Andrew all moved down at the same time, and John actually, because John went to Con High.
Right. Yeah.
And Adam was like a year later. Adam
Right.
Ponting. Anyway, well, I'm sorry, where was
You had
it?
a listen with Dale, and
Oh,
you were
yeah.
talking about Australians that was here.
Yeah, because Mike had only he got back in 86, I'm pretty sure.
Mike Knock.
Yeah, Mike Knock. So I was 89. I studied composition with him, which was an exercise in frustration for both of us. I grew up playing classical music, classical piano,
Mm-hmm.
and did 8th grade piano.
Oh, right.
But for the life of me, could not improvise, or I could not, and I still cannot compose or improvise, or just cannot get into it. It's just I don't know, not for me for some reason. I don't know. I suppose like just the melodic thing. It's just I don't know.
That's the thing.
Although funny enough, that arrangement of Waltzing Matilda was written at the piano.
Right.
Drinking sake at the piano.
So did you? Did when you came here, did people recall Dale Barlow and Mike Knock being
Sure.
here? Was that
Oh,
sort
sure.
of fresh?
Sure. A lot less. They have to be my age and older, pretty much. Joel Fromm knows that.
Does he? Oh, because he listened to the Brecker record.
Yeah.
A lot of people know that.
Know
Brecker
that record, yeah, because it's Brecker.
Everyone was into Brecker, so
Yeah.
everyone had that in out and around record, right?
What's the name of that tune, by the way? Is
it
that called
Break
In a
Time?
Break Time? Yes.
And so you know that. But I feel like that's. I know I keep harping on about this, but I just feel like it's significant that you know all that stuff.
I did a jazz track recording with
Mike.
Mike 88 when I was still a student,
Mm.
playing soprano pretty much.
Mm.
I know we did Hadrian's Wall, Break Time. I don't remember that. I remember doing Hadrian's Wall. I still remember
Mm.
his charts, how they look.
Mm.
But also I was playing with Cameron, who was playing with Mike,
Yeah.
and I was good friends with Fiona as well, who was Fiona Undy, who was living with Mike, was Mike's partner at the time too.
Yeah.
So no, Mike was. I went to a lot of Mike Knock gigs in the late '80s too.
Mm. And did you see Jackie Zowski around midnight too?
I don't remember. I do remember the first time I saw Jackie. It was that place just off George Street, and that's where Lee Konitz played too, like in that 1990 or something. It was like a little. You went down steps, like a cellar, bunch of beers on tap.
On George Street?
Just off George Street.
Can you be more specific about its location?
Okay, CBD. I'm really blanking on the name of the
Rio
place.
Cafe.
Yes. Yes. That was like you went down a few steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, the real L. Because it wasn't around that long, but...
No, I've played there, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Jackie playing there one night.
Mm.
Chris Abrahams, Tony Butt was in the band at the time.
Right.
And Lily. So it was the Godmothers.
Right.
And we were blown away. That would have been... either 90 or 91.
Did you see
Hold on, sorry. I did see Jack before that. I did come down because Adrian Mears was good friends with James Greening. James from Newcastle too. He connected with him. No, we did come down and see Jump Back Jack. So with Mike Bukowski. No, it's that pub opposite UTS. Camperdown.
Oh, yeah, right.
Is that called Camperdown? I don't know.
Yeah.
That pub, the Australia Hotel? I don't know. I don't remember the name of it. There in the front room there. No, that was Jump Back Jack. So that was Mark Simmons was playing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I remember being blown away. Yeah. So that was the first time I saw Jackie.
Mm. I'm just raving off the top of my head now, but I just feel like that you witnessed something really special.
I think in the late 80s, like early 90s, there was so much unbelievable...
Bernie and Dale and Mike and Jack...
all playing at their...
and Roger Frampton.
I'm serious. Like, those cats were like
really
all
special.
playing... No, it was. There were venues.
Mm.
You could hear them play regularly. I could hear Bernie at least once or twice a week.
Mm.
You know, you could hear everybody playing all the time, everywhere.
Mm.
You know?
Mm. Did you
in the basement. I remember seeing Templar Adventure the first time I saw them. So we used to come down from Sydney. We get the train down, get off at Circular Quay, go to the basement, and I saw Templar the first time. It was like the old basement. Yeah.
Mm. So we were talking about being one of the first Australians here. So you didn't really know any other Australians that were, except for you met Tim Otto. And
I met Tim. He helped me. He showed me around the East Village. Look, you know, like he was living in the East Village. You know, if you go into Yaffa Cafe, like he's where everyone puts up their flyers for apartments. That's how I found an apartment.
All right.
Yeah, Tim showed me around the hood, as it were. Maybe less scared. I was so scared when I first came here.
Because it was a frightening place, right?
East Village was pretty...
Crazy.
It was. It was intense.
Crazy.
You know, it was crazy. I also think I had no preparation for... I had severe jet lag when I came over the first time. The first time you come over... I've had it once since then, like paranoia. Yeah. You know, like severe symptoms of jet lag. I found out later.
First time I came here, I went crazy for a week.
No, it was, you know, it was extremely...
But that was 97.
Right.
So it was already a little bit tough. Right. But it was still hairy. I thought it was pretty hairy.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I might have seen you play at the St Mark's Bar in 97.
For a minute before it closed.
The band took over the jam session.
No, the bartender, they wanted a different vibe. They I led the jam session for a while there. I think it was on a Sunday too.
Was Ashley in town by then? Or?
So Ashley, so when I came back in 95, I lived for 2.5 years in Hell's Kitchen. Mm. It's funny, like. And that's where everybody seemed to be living then. Yeah. You know, it was, things were getting priced out in the East Village. Yeah. Places like St Mark's Bar were turned into a yuppie bar with, you know, blah, 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 you know, that painting over the infamous mural in there and stuff like this. It was that place was really funky. I also did my first gigs there. With Clifford Barbaro. I learned a hell of a lot playing with Clifford. He was the first drummer that I had a really serious connection with in New York that I just... Oh, I'll talk about that for a second because that was like, you know, talking about learning experiences. I feel like these are some of the things I can't really learn there in Australia. Mm. And he's like, I got us a gig. It's like on Tuesday nights and we're a blues band. I was like, what? And you're asking me? What are you talking about? You know, like
a white girl from Newcastle?
Yeah, white girl from Newcastle.
Crazy?
Yeah. And and there was an Israeli guitarist. It was like a real mishmash. It was typical Clifford. He liked, the pianist was Austrian, I remember. We had a couple of different piano players. The first incarnation, he had 2 guitars. So I was like, really? Okay, for sure, So the first set we would play, everything was a blues. We'd play 81, we'd play all blues, we play bebop blues, we play like all sorts of different types of blues, but including a slow blues, which I'd not really ever played before. And being forced to play in a context like that, I think that really like gave, through that experience, he gave me the confidence to be expressive in that vein as well. Which I
said to you, Lisa, it's okay to play the blues.
Pretty much, yes.
Asking you to do it.
That's right, exactly.
Telling you, right.
It was the best blues band ever. Seriously.
I wish you would have.
We're gonna play 81. I'm like, okay, Cliff. I don't know why I even doubted you. It's like we're gonna play a slow blues to start off.
Yeah.
And a shuffle. We do all these different types of blues. I loved it. It was just such and that was his concept. It's just I loved it. It was just like you get stuff like that here. And I miss that because I feel like there is less of that around, unfortunately.
There's less people just playing tunes.
Yeah. I'm super lucky.
Playing together.
Yeah.
Informally at a gig. If
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm feeling super lucky. Twice a week, Thursdays and Sundays with Carl. He's 70 something. Again, I've never known this many standards now. I learned so many more standards, and I don't think I've played Stella or All the Things You Are in about 15 years. You know what I'm saying? But I've learned all these super obscure standards from that gig. That's just all the time. He's bringing in these tunes that he moved in the late 60s. He's still he's been in the same apartment on Court Street. Last night we played opposite you can see his apartment from where we were playing last night. That he used to be cousins. It was a few different places. He used to play it in the 70s. He moved in 1968. Now he's playing there again. Only in New York. And he came as a guitarist, and he was singer's famous favorite guitarist to accompany. So he just knows a ridiculous amount of tunes, and so he brings stuff in all the time. So I'm just learning all these really cool songs I didn't know exist in the world.
I think we should take a break.
Yeah.
And talk some more, and I'll just turn the camera off and we'll just
do it.
Because we've been talking for an hour, but I think we should talk a bit more. Because we can on the internet. We're in the digital world. We can talk forever. We can film our whole life.